Good morning. Today I want to look at the book of Galatians. Maybe this next couple of weeks I'll go through certain wee bits of the book of Galatians. It's a fantastic book. Now, this book is addressed to believers and it's so relevant for today, you know, because uh, it's just not the same as then, but now, and it's the Apostle Paul talking about the dangers of believers watering down the gospel, being caught in weakness, feared to speak it, just backing down all the time and mixing the wrong things in, false teachers, false prophets, the lot. Uh, the way it looks at it is Paul has already been to Galatia before and is coming back again because he sees things as very wrong and tries to help the people. You see, as a believer, sometimes the enemy will try and drag you away from the truth, and you got to more or less like pull your socks up and go through the Bible again. Uh, Paul says about Ephesus, even he says he stayed there for a number of years, helping the people to get on their feet. But he was a man of vision too, and he says, "The minute I leave," he says, "wolves will come in to try and destroy you." And that's what we've got to watch all the time, realize that we're warfare. And here, people have been uh, they've been adding on to salvation. Uh, Today, we add on man's tradition to salvation, which is very wrong. But we've got to just take the gospel as it is. And these people was being influenced by false teachers. So he arrives on the scene and he starts, and he says, we're going to go with verse 6. It's just 4 verses we'll look at to open the book. He says in verse 6 of Galatians chapter 1, I am amazed that you are so quickly turning away from him who called you by grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another gospel, but there are some who are troubling you and want to change the good news. And this is very true for today. People want to change the gospel, want the gospel to be super friendly, which it is, but they want it not to have anything to upset people. They tell them that they're sinners, they tell them that they're going to a lost eternity without Christ, and that Jesus is the only way to heaven. And the enemy tries to mix it, and this is what has happened here. And Paul came to straighten them out, more or less. So we'll look at here. It says, he's amazed. He's amazed that they're turning away from the gospel or they're adding on to the gospel. And you're so quickly turned away to him who called you by the grace of Christ and turning to a different gospel. See, there's only one gospel. Not that there's another gospel, but there are some of you who are troubling you and want to change the good news. So I'm telling, as believers, we need to watch out all the time. Anybody wanting to change the message of Jesus, and He is the only way. And it says here about the Messiah, verse 8. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel other than what you have been preached to you, let him be anathema. Now that means let him be accursed. Now, it's amazing that so anybody saying, "Oh, I've had an angel that came and he delivered this message to me. I know it's a wee bit different from the gospel, but I think we should go down that road now." That's a false there all the time. Recognize that. And Paul's very prominent on here. He says, even if he says, even himself, if he changes the message, but even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you another gospel other than what you've been preached to you, let him be accursed. And I have said it before and now say it again. If anyone preaches to you a gospel contrary to what you've received, a curse may be upon him. Now, I remember a Christian said to me, be very careful and take good note if you see something repeating itself right away in the Bible. So he says, and look what he says in verse 10. So that's the whole message here, and Paul goes into it in great detail. In fact, you know, he's a wonderful man. He says the first time he says further on in this book here, he says, first time I came to you, I reckon a problem in my eyesight, physical ailment, and you'd have done anything for me. But now I'm coming here to correct you, and you can't stand me. And that can happen sometimes as believers. Sometimes, you come to try and help somebody, and you tell them, see what you're doing. The Bible doesn't say that. The Bible doesn't do that, and they just turn on you like no man's business. So this was happening to Paul, but Paul was going to stick it out and give the true message. And sometimes I need corrected as a believer. We all need corrected at times. And Paul was saying here, there's great danger of other people bringing falsehood in, and you're falling for it. In fact, you only see Peter even fall for it. The Apostle Paul fell for this, and Paul corrected him further on. It is really good to read this book, But look what he says here, verse 10. For am I now trying to win the favor of people or God? Sometimes you have to really look at that. Are you trying to please? That God says that's not right, but you're saying, well, if I do this, people's going to be upset. They're going to be angry with me. I'm going to lose my friendships. I'm going to lose this and that. But what do you got to do? You got to realize that you're in a warfare, and you've got to speak the truth. It's not my truth. It's not your truth. It's the truth of the Bible. You can't alter things in the Bible, and you can't add on to it. It says, you can't bring anything up superior to equal with the Bible either, because it's God's word. For I'm now trying to win the favor of people or of God, or am I striving to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a slave of Christ. So it's time for choosing here. It's a time to make decisions. And if you belong to Christ, you got to listen to what Christ says. Now this is pretty tight and very difficult to get into, but it's a lovely book, and it'll actually help me greatly to they look for discernment and things. And we will look at some other things maybe next week. But you really got to get into this book. It's wonderful for believers to understand, and for people to hear what the lovely message of Christ is. I'll leave it like that today. Okay, bye.